how about I prep for a bodybuilding competition? Because then I have an acute goal, right? The competitive drive thing that kept me focused, kept my attention. And then I had to make healthy choices, right, in order to fulfill the goal. So that was part of how I did that.
This can't be it. There has to be more. Wait, am I crazy? No. If you're yearning for more and working hard to make your dreams a reality, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Dreamcatchers. It's the only show committed to helping you self-actualize and then transcend, leaving you with the legacy you've always desired. Listen in on conversations with successful philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and founders every week as we connect with them for inspiration, education, and direction. Your host, Jerome Myers, is here to help you exit the matrix and transform into a leader of your own revolution. The question is, do you believe your dreams should be real? Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Dreamcatchers podcast. I'm your host, Jerome, and I've got the pleasure, and I didn't ask her how to say her name, but I think I know how to say it, of having Alissa Nelson on with me today. Alissa, how are you?
Hi. Oh, I'm fantastic. And I actually do go by all three names, a little like a serial killer, but not. So it's Alissa Daire Nelson. And the reason for that is many, and which we can dive into if you would like. But in part because there's a lot of Alissa Nelsons out there, I realized. And thus, to recapture my original identity in this body, I needed to add Dare as my middle name, which is my maiden name, which is the name that I was put on this earth with. There we go. Alissa Daire Nelson.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, we're about to go deep today.
We are.
We are about to go deep. So, what part of the world are you in?
I am in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So I
Oh,
happen to be on the St. Paul side of the river, but I love the Minneapolis side of the river as well. So I have some ties over there too. But if you've ever been to the Twin Cities, you will know that there is like a distinct difference between the St. Paul side of the river and the Minneapolis side of the river.
okay. And so I do things really differently here. I don't make people wait all the way to the end of the episode to find out how they can learn more about the guests. And so I know the folks are going to love what you have to say. What's the best way for them to get in contact with you or learn more about what you have going on?
Yeah, well, my website's obviously a good place. It's daretosucceed.com, and that's Dare spelled like my name. So it's DAIRE, the number two, succeed.com. And people often spell succeed with one C or not.
One
I
E.
don't know. So
Yeah.
it's like,
All
yeah,
right.
it gets confusing because there's a lot of like circular-ish letters in there. But SUCCEED. So daretosucceed.com. You can find me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is actually where I do a lot of really vulnerable posts, which I'm good with being vulnerable professionally on LinkedIn as well, but it's a space that I can be even more so personal, and I have an intentionally public profile on Facebook, which also means I get some weirdo weirdos. And then I just delete and block, and that's fine. But I think it's important for people to be able to see my story, even if they're not necessarily friends with me on Facebook. So they can also find me on Facebook too. I kind of avoid the Twitter. It's not really my jam. So yeah, so that's where they can find me.
The Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram.
That's right.
So you dropped the word, and we love vulnerability, we love authenticity on the podcast. And so the first question I'm going to ask you, and just going to dive in right off the gate, do you remember when you had your red pill moment? That day, that moment, that minute, that second where you're like, I got to get out of here because this thing is a matrix, it's a prison.
You know, I think for me, and there's been so many moments, right? Because when you go deep, then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, there's another layer of this. I think the moment for me where I really had that red pill awareness was when I took the StrengthsFinder profile. And I know that sounds like really weird, but I was in my early 30s and I took this profile, and it was something that had 40 years of research behind it. So, thus, it was statistically relevant. It was all these things with my healthcare background that was important, like evidence based research, da 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 da. But more importantly, it was something that was concrete and solid that told me there were things that were right with me, because all of my life I had believed there was all of these things that were wrong with me. And so when people said, "Oh, I think you're great," or "I think this," or "I think that," and they were complimentary or positive, I was like, "Well, they're just saying that." Like, that's not real. And so that was why I chose to go get certified in the Strengths Finder, and now it's called Clifton Strengths profile, because I was like, man, like this is real. Like this proves that there's all these things that are right with people. And what happens if we focus on that? Like that feels a whole lot better. And so, of course, there's been layer upon layer upon layer after that. But that was really the thing that got me looking at a strengths based approach to life, to business, to all of it, versus the how do I fix myself so that I can operate better and be more efficient, be more productive, and yada, yada, yada.
Okay. So we got that point in time, right? You got the test, and the test said that you were good at something.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's go back to
Mm-hmm.
what life was like before that.
Yeah.
What was that life? How'd you create it?
Yeah. So that life before that was really firmly based in what I accomplished. And I was only worthy and worthwhile when I had accomplished something. And so thus I identified my value based on what I had done. So I was absolutely a straight A student. I was a Division 1 gymnast. I didn't stay there for very long. That's a whole other story. Um, but I was good at a lot of things, um, because I needed that in order to feel like I was worthwhile. So that's how I operated. I was also in a family of 7 kids. That's how I grew up. I was number 6 of those 7. And I was kind of always getting in trouble, but not like major trouble, not like trouble with the police, because I knew like that was like, no, don't do that. But like getting, I always I always wanted to ask, like, well, why is that rule in place? So my Enneagram actually shows that I'm a challenger, which is makes a lot of sense. Like I was always like, but why? Why the status quo? Like that doesn't make any sense. Just because it was done that way before, why does it have to be done that way? I was also the kid that thought I could outsmart all of the mistakes of my older siblings. I could not. But actually, some of them I could outsmart because I was actually a pretty smart kid. You just had to figure out how to not get caught, right? Um, and so I vacillated, and I've always been this bright, shiny, super passionate, super energetic human being, right? But that also meant that I was too much for a lot of people. And so I vacillated between this really outspoken, really bright, really passionate person, and then I'd shrink, right? Because I'd be too much. I'd get my hands slapped. I'd get knocked down. I'd get told, one thing or another. And so I really vacillated all through life, like leaning in and leaning out, leaning in and leaning out, which is exhausting. It's exhausting, right? Trying to be me, be myself, but then also trying to conform to what other people felt was acceptable for me. Um, and in doing so, I also pursued 2 different degrees. So my very first degree was in nutrition. I was a registered dietitian for about 8 years. Went back to nursing school, got my nursing degree. I was a nurse, a bedside nurse, and then a nurse care coordinator. So I was a nurse, practicing nurse for about 3 years. Um, and then during that time, I also started a direct sales business, right? Um, which we can talk, but we don't need to talk about that. The business model did not serve me, as it does not serve many people. But I learned a lot during that time. And it was during that time that I actually hired my first coach. And I was like, what if I could show up to a table and instead of asking this person what their dreams are and then trying to sort of recruit them into my dream, right? Because that's the one of the biggest ways that you make money in direct sales or network marketing is by recruiting others. I was like, I don't want to do that. This business isn't right for people. I don't want to recruit them into this business. I want to recruit them into their dream, not mine. Um, and so through that exposure, I was like, I think I want to be a coach. Um, anyway, and so that's kind of the pathways that got me to where I am and what I operated like before I was ever exposed to this StrengthsFinder profile. But it was through that direct sales company and some networking things that I was involved with that I got exposed to it. So while I'm glad I'm not in it still, I am grateful for the experience.
Wow. Okay, so being a dietitian wasn't enough. You had to go
Mm-mm.
be a nurse. It's the overachiever, the perfectionist coming out at every
Mm-hmm.
level, right? Or I can
Mm-hmm.
do it all. You guys,
Yeah.
you can't tell me anything, right?
Right. Well, and I'd also reached the pinnacle of my career at age 26.
That's
As
encouraging.
a registered dietitian, and I always wanted something next to go, but in the hospital setting, the next place to go, like the next step up from the nutrition support dietitian, blah, 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 right? Which does more of the medical nutrition therapy, TPN, tube feeding, you're the ICU working with the intensivist team. And it's really fascinating and awesome. But the next step up from that was the nutrition services manager. And I didn't like, I waited tables through college. Like I did not want to work in food service. That just, and that can appeal and it is the right job for and right career for some people. It was not the right move for me. And so I was like, well, now what? Like, what's the next step? Right. Because there always had to be a next step because where I was never good enough. And that's why I went back to nursing school.
Yeah. I think it was interesting because you were talking about the gymnastics and some of the other stuff, and you were just put in all these situations where you were being judged and people were looking for your imperfections. And I think that wired you to not
Mm-hmm.
feel like you were good enough or
Yeah.
inadequate. And
Yeah.
I think it's already tough enough as a woman with all the body issues and all the other stuff that goes with it. But when we
Mm-hmm.
start thinking about, well, now we're going to put you in a pageant or we're going to put you in something where they judge your ability, it gets
Yeah.
really, really, really
Yeah.
difficult.
Well, ironically, the whole reason I became a dietitian was it was a dietitian my freshman year of college who actually helped me to see food in a more healthy light. And so while I did not have an eating disorder, I had very disordered eating. And she was the first person who said, no, Alissa, you need to eat more, not less. And I was like, what? What is this? What is this madness? Because I'd been dieting since I was 12, you know? Um, and so that was like, she helped me to see myself in a different light. And thus, I went and became a dietitian so I could help others see themselves in a different light. So like this thread of wanting to help people see themselves as 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 all they are, not just as something that needs to be fixed. Um, you know, pushed me into that first career for sure. So it is kind of interesting how it all fits together. And then to come full circle, I now am a head coach of a high school gymnastics team. And so I get to breathe life and belief into all of these teenage girls that, are going through the same challenges or similar challenges, right? As I went through. And now I get to be that person to say, you're amazing. And let me help you see why. So this is my first year with the team that I'm with, and I'm having them take the Clifton Strengths profile so that I can help them see with the same proof, the same evidence, not just, as an encouraging coach, but for real, like these are all the reasons why you're amazing. Because I've often said, man, if I had this information from someone I could hear it from, which is important, right? At age 15 or 16, the difference that may have made in my life. And now I get to be that person for these young people.
I think that can be the greatest gift that we can offer the world. often is just being the person that we needed when we were
Yeah.
at a different point, a point
Yeah.
behind us, one of our
Yeah.
past.
For sure.
So you mentioned that you hired a coach, and so how did that coach help you get to that red pill moment that we started the episode?
Yeah. So it was after I had been exposed to the strengths profile that I finally hired my first coach. Is that true or not true? When did I? Maybe it was around the same time. And this person just helped me see that it's okay to need help, and that the role of a coach is not to fix you, but to unleash you. And I was like, ooh, that's pretty awesome. Right. Like, it wasn't that I was hiring this person. Yes, the pain point was there to hire a coach. Like, I needed some help, right? And I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be, etc. But the role of the coach wasn't to fix me. It was to help me see myself in a new with a new lens, and to then unleash me. I was like, this is awesome. Like, you can really make a career out of something like this. Like, whoa. And so that to me was a really powerful thing. And I think it was actually shortly thereafter that I was exposed. Yes, it was, because I started my coaching business. And then, you know, like, because anybody can hang out their shingle, by the way, and call themselves a coach. Um, which yeah, so God bless the first people who hired me as a coach, because I think there was value there, but I am a much better coach now than I was then. And then I enrolled in this strength strategy certification, which was an 8 or 9 month certification, and it was really intense, and really helped me to dive deep into strengths to help me make strengths actionable for the people that I was working with, and also for myself, right? So I got to learn about me while I got to learn how to also unleash it for others.
Whoa. So you're going through the process, and it sounds like you're the guinea pig, right? You're experimenting with yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah, which is that's totally my jam, right? Like, I've long done that. I mean, it's part of the reason that I went through dietetic school, right? Was like, oh, if this dietitian in this, few months that I was working with her helped me to make all of these ahas, right? What more could I do? And I did guinea pig. I experiment with myself, even in that first degree. Like, uh, it was really interesting as an undergrad. I was like, well, let's just see, like, how much weight can I lose? Do not recommend. It's not like, but like, this was my 21-year-old self. Like, could I be as lean as I want to be based on the the you know monkeying with my macros and my nutrition? And like, the reality is I could. Like, that was fascinating for me. It's like, what is my body capable of? um anyway, so I got down to a weight that is not healthy for me. And it was the first time I was like, ooh, I need to gain weight. So again, disordered eating, like, the mindset there was not healthy. Do not recommend. 1 out of 10 recommend. But and now I can see the unhealthiness of that. But it was like this big experiment. Like, what can I do? What is the experience? How does this feel going through this? Um, anyway, so yeah, I've always made myself the guinea pig, because I have often said, I don't want to ask anybody to do something that I am not willing to do myself, or that's not right. You know what I mean? So yeah,
I think that's
and
super
now your
important.
entire audience thinks I'm bonkers. So
Or they identify with you because they've been experimenting. And I think the majority of us do the experimentation
yeah,
until we aren't able to get the result that we desire. And that's when we actually go get help because we're stubborn. Right?
yeah, we
We're
are
smart
stubborn
enough.
humans.
We've been
Mhm.
successful. We've been able to figure stuff out on our own in the past. Why would I pay this person all this money when I'm already smart and capable? What could they possibly tell me or do for me? And then you get frustrated with not being able to attain or achieve the result. And then make an
Yeah.
adjustment. you
Yeah.
you get some help.
Turns out that eyes outside of yourself actually do help.
More than most people would like to admit. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, you get the certification, you start serving some folks, you start serving more folks. Were there some challenges along the way?
There were absolutely more challenges than there were not. There were more tearful days than there were happy days. Um, yeah, yeah, there's a lot of challenges because I loved what I was doing, but I had to go like do all the mundane things that you have to do to run a business, right? And mundane does not light me up. So then it was like, wow, okay, so I just need to hire somebody to do the things I don't want to do, right? But there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, a lot of entrepreneurs are stuck in this donut hole, I like to call it, right? Like you're making enough and you're busy enough that all the mundane things like either fall off your plate or they feel like too much or you're working, all these hours, but you're not necessarily making enough to be able to afford to delegate, to hire someone to delegate all these things too. Problem number two, even if you invest in somebody who can do the things that you're not great at, if you haven't created a process for doing those things, you end up micromanaging this person because they have to ask you at every turn. So, what am I doing with this? What is the process for this? And so then you get even smarter and you go, okay, I'm going to pay a really high level executive assistant or virtual assistant to be able to create these processes while we're going through it. And so then you hire that person and now you're paying, 45, $60 an hour, which I have done to hire this person who's going to create the processes and do all of these things because they're high level, they're very skilled. And then that person gets so frustrated with your ADHD brain that they end up quitting, right? And then you feel like an even bigger loser because you can't even hold on to someone that you're paying $60 an hour. So like there's all these challenges. And so then you're like, oh, I guess I have to just do it all myself. So again, not that it's not possible, it certainly is, but there are lots of barriers to being able to delegate those things out effectively. The other thing that I did not realize, although I had some awareness of it, was that I had this undiagnosed ADHD, which was like so evident from the time I was a little girl, so evident. But I thought, well, I can personal develop my way out of this, right? Like, yeah, I can just, I can fix this. And I even used my StrengthsFinder profile to justify in my own mind that this is just my strengths. I just need to leverage my strengths and mitigate my weaknesses, and it's going to be good because I've got an activator right in my top 5, and the activator is all about movement. It's all about moving. Now, I would like to see actually, I would really love to see a study. And Gallup owns Clifton Strengths, right? And they do great research. Like, I want to see a research study on the number of people with activator or ideation in their top 5 that also have ADHD. We know that ADHD is more common, significantly more common in entrepreneurs than people who carry W-2 jobs for a lot of reasons, right? But I'm really curious about that. So I was like, oh, it's just activator, it's just ideation. Like, I just need to like leverage this and not fall into my overuse patterns and blah, blah, blah. Now, so that helped me create a lot of strategies for success, but it didn't mitigate the underlying problem. And literally, my ADHD diagnosis is less than a week old. I finally, at the age of 43, went through the testing and got the diagnosis. And so now I'm in the midst of, with my doctor, creating a treatment plan that's going to actually work for me. So all of these years, this is back to your original question, all of these years of the lows more so than the highs, right? Like when I'm serving clients, it's magic. It's magic and I love it. But all of the other things, have been so frustrating and so disheartening and so anxiety producing, right? That I have always felt like I'm just 3 feet from gold. Like I'm right there. And the 3 feet from gold moment I have been begging the universe for. And that 3 feet from gold moment happened last Thursday when I got this ADHD diagnosis, because it's like walking around with poor vision and then wondering why you can't see. So I'm really excited for what the next stage of this might be.
So you were hoping for this thing, you got the thing. What was your worst fear in the process, and how'd you overcome it?
Mm-hmm. My worst fear in the process. Are you talking about my ADHD diagnosis process? That?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my worst fear was that I would test too well and that I would show up as not having ADHD, because one of the unbeknownst to myself strategies, inadvertent strategies that I created was this competitive nature. So on the strengths profile, competition is number 26 for me. So it's like way in my blind spot, and that's real. Like I don't care who wins. I want us all to win. Like I am cheering you on, I am cheering this person on. Like it doesn't matter to me because I want everybody to win. But I had used this competitive adrenaline or competitive drive to finish things, because that's part of my ADHD is I would start all these things but I wouldn't finish. So people are always like, Alyssa, you are so competitive. I'm like, actually I'm not. But I had inadvertently used this competitive adrenaline drive to finish things. And so thus I was a really good and am a really good test taker. Like, because that test will be my bitch. I will make it. I don't know if I can curse or not, but like I will beat this thing, right? And so I was very worried that I would go in and I would test and he'd be like, "You're totally fine. I have no idea what you're talking about." And I'm like, "Oh my God," you know? So that was my biggest fear. And I lost a lot of sleep over it. In between the testing sessions and the results session, of what am I going to do if he actually says I don't have it after all these years, and you know, and there was a couple of tests that actually did not support a diagnosis of ADHD because I tested so well, but then there was just all the other things that were like, oh yeah, you clearly have this, and then he went on, and that was the other thing is I thought it was either you have it or you don't, and then go on your merry way. But they actually went through that, this assessor went through and said, these are where your deficits are per the tests. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is so interesting. So just having the diagnosis and the results of, like, my auditory memory, for instance, is horrible, like far below average. It's probably because there's so much going on in my brain that like stuff just doesn't get in, right? And so the irony is, like, years ago, I'm like, in an effort to be present, I'm like, I'm not going to take notes anymore, not during coaching sessions, not during conferences or learning, like, right? Because I'm going to be present. I'm going to focus and be present. And I have the slides I can look at later, but I wasn't taking any notes. Well, I need the activity of actually taking the notes, right? The physical activity. Plus, I need the visual connection. So, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, I'm like, oh my God, like what has happened in my memory? Like, I can't retain anything. Well, this is why. Like, duh. So now, literally just in the last week, I've been able to share with my clients, hey, I'm going to start taking notes, and this is because I really want to get this, right? I want to be able to retain this so that we can build on this. And they're like, yeah, that's totally fine. But in the coaching realm, they say don't take notes because every time you look down to take notes, you break a connection with your client. So it's opposite of what coaching practice tells you you should do, but it's what I need in order to be my best for my clients. So, even just having those things. And again, I haven't even had the discussion with my primary doctor about medication yet. But that's been great too, because that was the other fears. Like, okay, so once I have this diagnosis, then what? Like, I, I mean, I've known that I've had all these symptoms. So how is this going to change anything? You know? Um, and that's part of why I put off getting tested for so long.
A lot of people want to unlock their ultimate potential but lack the strategy, support, and stamina necessary to achieve their major goals. They often try to overcome these challenges by trying to do it on their own, causing frustration, fatigue, and eventually failure. We have developed a model for a center life, aka the red pill, to help them bolster their beliefs, gain clarity on their path to success, and provide accountability as they take action on their goals. When they take the red pill, they rapidly accelerate attainment of their goals and begin to experience a life of significance and impact. Want to find out more? Hop over to jeromemyers.co. Now, let's get back to the episode. Wow. Because what if it doesn't change anything?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think a lot of us, I mean, like there's people listening who have an idea and they won't try the idea because what if it doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are people who are in love with someone and they won't say anything to them because what if they're not interested?
Yeah.
And once you know, it's hard to unknow.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to unknow that they don't have the same level of interest as you do.
Yeah.
It's
Which
hard
goes
to
back.
unknow. Go ahead.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I was going to say, which goes back to that red pill moment. It takes courage to take that red pill because you can't unlearn what you know.
So we'll see if this one trips you up, but I know you got it somewhere. So was there a rock bottom? Like was there a space when everything was on the line?
In some ways, in my lifetime, I have been through a divorce. So some people would consider that a rock bottom. Um, in my lifetime, I have had worries over alcohol. Am I an addict? I've certainly abused alcohol, and done stupid things based on having the alcohol in my system. And some of those things like put me at risk of like this could endanger my marriage. So I am remarried to the most amazing man on the planet. Um, and he is the guy who says, "Look, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." And that safety has made it okay for me to pursue the help I need, right? Um, and so the rock bottom for me just was this moment about it was about last October or so. And here I've always had a coach, right? Since I started my business, I've always had a coach. And I was like, I just feel like I need to stop. Like I feel like I've been full speed ahead, but I just keep getting this sense that I need to slow down and heal. And I was like, heal from what? And I didn't have the answer to that, but I just felt this overwhelming sense that it was time for me to slow down. Now, I just mentioned I have activator, I have ADHD, blah, 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 right? So for me to slow down, incredibly difficult. Um, and I was like, I don't like, what am I healing from? Right. And so I started reading a lot of books and started reading about ancestral wounds and, other types of like, maybe this isn't even me. And it was really this like, I can't even really explain it, but it's just something I had to do. So I stopped working with a coach, started working with a therapist. And for the most part, therapy was like fabulous. Like, I mean, nothing uncovered or whatever, but sitting in all of this uncomfortable space of like, well, what happens if I just sit with this emotion instead of trying to move away from it or move through it? I've never been really an avoidant person, but like, okay, so I feel the sadness and now I just have to like move through it, like take care of it. What's making you sad? Address that. Say sorry if you need to, which is you have to say sorry a lot when you have ADHD. um, and then move through it. Like fix the problem, put the thing in place so that it doesn't happen again, and then just move through. And I had to just sit, right? And so this pursuing of the diagnosis was because of that. It's like there's something that doesn't fit here, and so I need to actually follow through with this, even if it's really scary and even if it's uncomfortable. Um, so that was a big part of it, as well. And then there was some drinking things in there. I've for a long time had a lot of shame and guilt attached to any amount of alcohol consumption, that I've had. So the best explanation I've ever heard of ADHD is you have a Ferrari engine brain and bicycle brakes. So in one of the books that I read in this healing time was about ADHD, and he said, you know, people resist medication because they don't want to kill their magic. So true. He goes, but here's the thing: you have been medicating. You've been medicating with coffee to help you focus, and with alcohol to slow your brain down. And I just cried. So I was like, that's so me. That's so me. But here's the problem: you have a drink to help slow your brain down because it is so busy, right? That you remove the bicycle brakes, and now, like, what was little inhibition before is now none. And so, understandably, like, having another drink or those kinds of things became dangerous things, right? And so it gave me a whole lot of peace around, oh, this may be related to my ADHD, not because I have a drinking problem, but because I was treating my ADHD in part with alcohol. And so, like, there's been healing that's come around that as well. And also, I don't want to be the person who destroys my life, or worse, somebody else's life, because of alcohol, right? So, with that, that was something that I also knew I needed to take care of. And so there's been quite a few moments where I would say that there's been sort of rock bottoms with coming out of a drinking episode. And like, okay, I'm not going to drink for a year, so I wouldn't drink for a year. Okay, cool. And then, oh, like, clearly I don't have an alcohol problem, so I can drink again. That kind of thing, right? Oh, I'll have all these rules around my drinking, and then you break your own rules, and then it's like, well, but if I have to have a lot of rules around my drinking, do I have a drinking problem? Because all these things that go around. And so again, there's this extra layer of peace that has come with this diagnosis as well. It's like, and I have given myself, this rule, um, no alcohol. And that's also in part because I'm prepping for a bodybuilding competition, as well. So no alcohol based on that. But like, until I know how to manage this thing, and I'm not going to say no alcohol ever again, which may be a decision I make in the future. I don't know. But not right now. It's just not right now, you know? Um, so that was a long answer to your rock bottom question. But
Well, but it's comprehensive, and I think it's to the point of the beginning of the show about being vulnerable and authentic. I think people have a really hard time expressing the things that you just shared. So I don't think that ever happens in vain. I think there's somebody who's listening right now who's extremely grateful that you were able to take such a deep dive and share it with no shame. It's
yeah.
just a matter of fact. It happened. It has been. And we're moving on because it's part of my journey and it's part of
Hmm.
my story. And I'm here to help you on your
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
So I certainly appreciate it, and I didn't feel like it was long. It was just there was a lot to unpack and unravel there. And so, as you were speaking about that piece of your journey, I couldn't help but wonder, like, how did you manage your health at that point? Because there's all these different pieces, and then
Mhm.
people who want to get better, they need a diagnosis so they can know what the treatment plan is in order to deal with whatever is going on with them. And I know people get tired of hearing doctors say, "Oh, I don't know," or "Who knows," or
Mhm.
whatever else. So, like, how did you stay healthy when you knew something was wrong, but you didn't know what was wrong?
Yeah. One of my strengths in my strengths finder profile is positivity. And so, that was one of the things that I used a lot, was like, let's reframe this. I failed, but how can I use this as a means of learning instead of just feeling really shitty about myself? Um, so that was a part of it, was this positivity thing, although positivity can spiral in on itself, and like either I'm 95% of the time like way up, here we go, yeah, let's great, let's reframe, or I'm like 5% of the time like on my couch, bawling and eating bonbons and whatever, right? um
I
I
never
don't
heard
think
of a bodybuilder that eats bonbons.
well, that's a whole episode for another day, but the bodybuilding industry is incredibly is known to be incredibly unhealthy with regards to nutrition, and that's it. Again, that's a whole nother thing. But during prep, no, they certainly don't. And so that was part of how I managed some of those things, was like, well, how about I prep for a bodybuilding competition, because then I have an acute goal, right? The competitive drive thing that kept me focused, kept my attention, and then I had to make healthy choices, right, in order to fulfill the goal. So that was part of how I did that. The other part was honestly a lot of work on self love. It absolutely helped to have a coach in my corner all the time, right, to help me reframe, to help pull me out of these deep dumps of sadness and whatever when I felt like I'd failed so badly. So that was really helpful, and I am a coach that believes in coaching because it helped me, and it's part of what I get to do to help my clients as well. So that certainly was was part of what helped me keep my health front and center. Also, I have two teenage daughters and a husband who I need to be at my best in order to be at my best for them. And so over the years, it shifted to being the best for them, to being the best for me is the way that I am the best for them. Right. So it moved from an externalized, I just got to do what it takes to be what they need. Right. To I got to do what it takes for me to be my best me. And out of that, I am my best self for them. I kind of mentioned how I'm a gymnastics coach now so that I can be the adult that I needed at that age. But my entire focus as a mom is to be the type of mom that I needed. And my oldest daughter, who's 16 now, she is very much like me, and my 15-year-old is not at all. And so, but we work hard to connect and to support and um to be the mom, because my husband to ask me that many times, like, why do you work so hard? Like, you're a good person, right? Like, why are you reading another book on self-development? Why are you watching another documentary like Brene Brown again? Right, like all of these things. And I'm like, because I feel it is my job to do all of the healing and all of the development to be the very best that I can be for them and for you. And that journey never ends. So, yeah, I'm going to keep working on this until. And he's like, okay, I love you. I just need you to know I love you no matter what. Yeah.
I think it's coming from a healthy place. I think there was a point in your journey where you were not doing these things. You were doing them out of guilt. You were doing them out of
Yes.
lack. And now it's like, well, I got to unlock all the potential because it's still
Mm-hmm.
there. And, I like where I am, but man, I know there's so much more that's available to me. And those
Yes.
two perspectives are very, very different.
100%. 100%. So my mantra in the last year has been, I love myself and others completely and unconditionally. And I was like, how do I do that? Like, how do I, you know, my end goal, right, is to be love and to express it. Because love is unconditional love is like the highest vibration, right? that you can be. And I was like, that's what I want to be, like beyond being a mom, being a wife, being a business owner, being a coach, being a friend or a daughter, like all these things, all these roles that I play. I want to be, love, and express it. And so I had to figure out, like, what is unconditional love? Like, it's not unboundaried love. It's unconditional. So Prentice Hemphill says that boundaries are the distance that I need to love you and myself at the same time. And I love that quote. Yeah, that's
Ooh.
big. That's big,
So
right?
give us an example of that. I mean, it sounds really cool, but make it practical.
Yeah. Okay. So I was involved for a couple of years with a nonprofit coalition in North Minneapolis that was had an amazing mission. And so I was right in there doing all the things, like at the cost of effort and energy I was putting into my business. And I very quickly became kind of one of the, I don't want to say top people, but one of the most certainly influential people in this coalition. Um, and and I loved it, except that the person that was leading this, every time I'd have a conversation with this person, I would end up with a stomach ache. And it was really frustrating. And I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel like my opinion really mattered. I felt like I got placated a lot. Um, but I was like, but the mission, right? And when I heard Prentice Hemphill say that, I was like, oh, I need to create some distance and space from this. And so, as much as it hurt, and I grieved it like I grieved leaving this coalition like the loss of a dear friend, um,
Oh,
because I believed so hard in the mission. But I had to step away from it because I wasn't able to love myself and the mission and the leader of this coalition with that level of closeness, right? So I now can watch this coalition do its thing and cheer it on and be happy for it and everything else. But I love myself enough to not harm my own health in the interim. So another example of that would be, with my ex-husband, and he and I forged a really good, what I thought was a really good friendship post divorce, for many, many, many years. Um, but every once in a while, stuff would blow up, and I would, work to make things, fix things and blah 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 blah, so that it was good for the girls and all of these other things. Except that, like, I would take care of the things, which is exactly what I did in marriage. Okay. um, and so in late February, I finally said, enough's enough. Like, I'm not going to take you blowing up at me and blaming me and calling me all these names and accusing me of all these things when I'm literally doing what's best for the girls. And of course, I'm certain he has a very different perspective on how this all went down. So understanding that, the truth is, my story and his story and someplace in between that, right? But I just said, I can't be friends with you anymore. Like, oh, why would you, like, that's crazy. People get in fights. I'm like, yeah, but it's this disrespect thing that I can't do anymore. And so now we are co-parents. And again, grieving the loss of that friendship that I thought we had. But this distance is what I need in order to love myself and to be able to stay in a place of compassion and love for him. It just needs to be over there. Does that
I
make
love
sense?
it. You're protecting yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
love it.
yeah. And again, it allows the space for him to be a good person, just not good for me. Right. And I think that's a really important thing. Like, we don't have to demonize people. We don't have to demonize ourselves or others and say they're, an awful person or a narcissist, which I think is a term that's thrown around maybe a little bit too much right at this moment. But like, it's I don't have to do that. I can just say he's not healthy for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And we get to choose. And I think that's the magic of it all. There are a lot of people who live in a world where they don't think they have any choice. And
Yeah.
I do believe that you have the choice to decide what you do. You just don't get the choice of the consequences of what you do. And there's a likely outcome from a lot of the decisions we make, but none of those things are certain. And so,
Yeah.
in that, I just appreciate that. I think that concept is so profound and really excited to hear that one because, you know, some people feel guilty about making those choices.
Mm.
I mean, they feel like they have to keep being abused by family members or partners or friends or kids or whoever they are responsible for loving because of whatever the relationship is or was. And I think it's freeing to be able to adopt that mantra and then live that out in practice.
Yeah.
And, I just titled this episode, Love Yourself Enough Not to Harm Yourself, because I think
Hmm.
that is just the common thread throughout this show, from the disordered eating to
Yeah.
the drinking to all of the interactions. And each time it seems like you've just leveled yourself up when you've encountered these conflicts and been
Hmm.
able to find a new safe and healthy space for you. And
Hmm.
you continue to do that work until, right?
Yeah.
And until is probably when it's over, not
Yeah.
sometime before that. And so,
No.
Alissa Daire Nelson, you are absolutely a dream catcher. And I want to
Thank
ask you
you.
the final question.
Sure.
And this is one I ask every guest, and it's, what's the one thing you want the listeners to take away from this episode?
Mm. Um, I really think it is that you're absolutely, unquestionably amazing. And, and, um, looking at yourself for where you can improve, where you can level up, doesn't require you to beat yourself up and to think you're less than, but to love yourself to that success. Um, you know, I think our society uses a lot of stick motivation, right? Like beating you with a stick kind of thing. But if you can say, I love myself enough to pursue the next level of myself, not because I am fractured or broken. And there may be things that have happened to you that have fractured or broken you. But to say, because, even if I broke a bone, I don't just say, well, geez, I broke a bone and this is just who I am. You go to the doctor and you set the bone, you get a cast and you heal it. So the personal development side of it is one thing, but then the healing aspect of it is another. Um, and so the human being that you are is absolutely amazing. Love yourself enough to pursue what you need to do to be that person that you are.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it directly from her lips to your ears. Alyssa, this was a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
It is my pleasure. And, again, if anybody has any questions or they just want to reach out and go, hey, this resonated I want to talk about it. I'm here. Like, I don't even like, okay, so I care about business, right? Business pays bills and all of that. But like these connections, these human conversations are even more important. And so reach out. I'm here.
To the listeners, your dreams should be real. We'll talk soon.
Mhm.
Thank you for joining the tribe today. We would love to hear from you. Please don't forget to rate, like, and share. Perhaps someone you know could benefit from what we've discussed. Until the next time, remember that your dreams should be real.